Miller, Tarik LaCour, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com and the Hook'em Horn Show. We are coming back today, kind of combining post-game reaction show and overreactions into one here. I was under the weather over the weekend. I was actually down in Austin, but I ended up having like the worst sore throat and fatigue that I've had from a cold in a long time. So I got the post-game coverage up on the site, and we're back here for you now. Monday overreaction show. That'll be the bulk of this. We'll also kind of take a look at the Big 12 title picture heading into Texas's bye week, and what we think some of the hardest games are for the second half of the season. But yeah, let's take a look back at the not fun stuff right now. Texas falls short 34-30 to number 12 OU. A ugly game, I will say. The Sooners take advantage of a couple of Texas miscues and turnovers, and ultimately Dillon Gabriel leads OU on a game-winning touchdown drive after it looked like Texas might get the win off a Bird Auburn field goal with about a minute and a half to go. Gabriel leads an OU drive down in a little over a minute, and they score a game-winning touchdown on a miscommunication. It looked like, what was that, between Jaron Thompson? Who did y'all catch who that was?
It was
Benda and Thompson.
Yeah,
and I think a little Derek Williams. I think
Yeah.
Derek was passing it off, and then it kind of got messed up in the chain there, and yeah.
Benda noted after the game, like, he took full responsibility. It was like, that was mine. That's on me. So, I mean, good for him for accepting responsibility. But
yeah, we talked about it. You can't be doing that in your fifth, sixth year on campus.
Yeah.
It's at this point, I do like the responsibility, but you gotta, at that point in the game, how long you've been on campus. I don't need to beat a dead horse here, but yeah, you just gotta know where to be in that situation. Texas falls to 5-1, 2-1 in Big 12 play. OU moves to 6-0 and 3-0 in Big 12 play. Texas is in a four-way tie for third place in the Big 12 standings right now, behind 2-0 West Virginia and 3-0 OU. I guess I don't need to give too many of my post-game reactions to this. I'll link my post-game takeaways in the description below if y'all want to read up a little bit more on that. Also link the overreactions. Here's, I'll just go ahead and say it, because this is a high level overreaction that I had from the game, and then we can just kind of throw out thoughts as we go along. I think the deciding factor in this game, correct me if I'm wrong, besides the Texas missed opportunities in the red zone, a couple of bad turnovers too, and also one of which was one of the missed opportunities in the red zone. For Texas's defense, I mean, this was a kind of a brutal showing against Dillon Gabriel in terms of defending the run. Dillon Gabriel gets 80 scramble yards, so gets about, I believe, 44 44-yard rush. I think that was on a design play. So he tallies up 114 rushing yards, one score. Texas allows the most scramble yards they have, I believe, in the last 5 years to a quarterback. And Dillon Gabriel was the majority of OU's rushing yards on Saturday. I believe they tallied up around 200. And so, Gabriel, I got to give him credit. He, put the team on his shoulders, put the team on his back when OU needed it. And I probably underestimated his short area quickness a little bit. But I was a little disappointed by Texas's linebackers. I thought that, Jalen Ford got juked on that 44-yard run. I was hoping for a little bit better from David Benda, kind of getting hats to the football. I guess just in general, I was hoping for better for Texas's ability to contain a dual threat at this point. I don't think that Texas made the necessary adjustments as the game progressed, either on defense. They kind of stuck to their base game plan, and I don't think that was a good idea, because Dillon Gabriel called bet on that, and OU was able to move the ball down the field effectively for some of the game, but enough to get the job done. My overreaction to this is that Texas's defense has the same dual threat quarterback issues they had in the last 2 years. We remember Donovan Smith in Texas Tech last year. That was a major issue. I mean, we played Donovan Smith in our next game. Houston's not OU, obviously, but I mean, could he still give us issues? Potentially. Donovan Smith is still having a decent year for Houston. He's got some weapons to work with, but that's my overreaction. You know what? I think it's an overreaction, but maybe y'all share the same opinion. I don't know. I'll pass it over to y'all.
Go ahead, Shane.
So I will push back a little bit on that. The Texas defense was actually really solid in the second half. They gave up that, touchdown drive to begin the half, but from the 10-minute mark in the third quarter until that last drive, they gave up no points. Of course, Oklahoma had a missed field goal and a turnover on downs, but there was a couple 3-and-outs in there, and I think for the most part they adjusted pretty well. It was that Gabriel elusiveness and scramble ability that came back to bite them time and time again. I think if you look at just the running backs, they average a little over 2 yards per attempt. And when you throw in Gabriel, who had, a career day rushing the football, that was an issue. Jalen Ford, who, we've come to know and love, he played every single snap on Saturday and was far and away the lowest graded player on defense. And, Andrew, you mentioned the time he got caught flat-footed, and in coverage, he was really bad. It was just a really poor game from Jalen Ford, and we really haven't seen that over his last 20 or so games. So that's a little bit, I wouldn't call it fluky. I think Oklahoma kind of put him in some disadvantageous spots, but for your quote unquote best player on the defensive side of the ball to play like that, you're fighting an uphill battle. But yeah, you got to give credit to Oklahoma. People were talking, Gabriel was only 19 of 34 until that last drive, but he made himself a Red River legend with that drive down the field. I think there's a lot of frustration, certainly. I think just playing so soft in that last minute, I don't know what we were doing there, because at that point it was obvious that we couldn't get pressure on the quarterback, nor could we bring him down. So I think you either got to send some extra bodies at Gabriel, or if you're only going to rush 4, then play the corners up on the outside. I mean, they're dropping like there's 20 seconds left in the game, and you're trying to prevent them from going 75 yards on one play. I didn't like the strategy at all. It seemed like for a lot of the game, and it came to fruition at the end, that the Texas defense was just on their heels, and for them not to be able to get any pressure out of base was a bit discouraging. But I think there are some positives to take away from it too. Unfortunately, that gets lost because you did lose the football game. But the fight Texas showed down 10 and to work themselves back in that game, and it was definitely encouraging. And you still have a chance to win the Big 12 title and make the college football playoff if they win their next 7 games. Right now, the college football playoff predictor has them at a 98% chance to get in if you can win those 7 games. You're going to be a touchdown favorite in every single regular season game, and then if you get that far, you'll likely play Oklahoma again in the title game. But just to wrap up my long rant here, I talked about it all week on our show and on a couple different shows that I think we all have suffered from the battered fan syndrome of this Texas team. Right when they get your hopes up, they knock you down, and Saturday was just another prime example of that. So I think it's going to be tough for the fan base to kind of rally back up. Hopefully the players respond well to it, but I know as someone who's loved this team for so long, just to lose in that way when you see the season playing out in front of you, it was definitely tough.
Yeah, Tarik, do you have anything you wanted to?
The biggest takeaway overreaction is Texas is a very stubborn team. When you know that something's not working and you do it anyway, you kind of deserve the results you get. Chance Mock tweeted out maybe an hour or two ago, I've thought about this 72 hours and I still don't understand why Texas didn't spy Gabriel. Just have Anthony Hill do that. He had done it with Jalen Milroe, so at least he would have slowed him down a couple of times, and Anthony Hill had some grown man hits in this game. Have him hit Gabriel once to see if he doesn't think twice about running again. I would think so. But that's not the only stubbornness. I still cannot believe that Texas got to the 1-inch line and couldn't get into the end zone on 4 tries by doing the exact same play 3 times in a row. Now, luckily, to his credit, Steve Sarkisian said, I shouldn't have done that. That's good. And then the fact that Shane just mentioned this, Texas ran the same coverage that they ran on the last drive of the second half, where OU wins the game, that they had run at the beginning of the second half when OU drove down the field, that they also ran on the last drive of the first half when they let them drive for that field goal. It's like, okay, the first two times didn't show you like, okay, yeah, we can't do this. Now, I'll say this, look, there are costs to playing aggressive on defense. You can get burned, something bad someone can fall down, someone can get pushed down, you can get tangled up, things can happen. I get it. But ultimately, PK should have said, "You know what? Look, this is what they live for. This is they go fast all the time. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to send everything I have at Gabriel, and if he wins it on his own, well, then he wins it. But we're not going to just let him get it." But they just said the other thing was like, well, maybe if we just don't make any mistakes, play off, maybe we'll get lucky. It never happens. It never works. Don't know what, no idea how that. I'm surprised Sark didn't just tell him like, okay. I mean, at one point when they crossed midfield, Sark should have called timeout and said, okay, if they want to win throwing it and doing that, that's fine. But you have to push up and not let this happen. We can't do the same thing 3 times. Like we already did that on the goal line. That cost us. Let's not do it now. But Texas is stubborn. Another thing that Texas is stubborn with. Why did it take so long before Sark said, you know what, I'm just going to give Jonathan Brooks the ball and make them stop him, which they couldn't. It came way too late. But eventually it helped and it worked out there. But it's just like there's something in the game plan where I don't know if it's Sark wants to be 2020 Alabama and he likes just throwing it to the outside and seeing Jalen Waddle just run all the way or Smitty or something like that. But Texas isn't that 2020 Alabama team, and that's okay. They don't have to be that team. But it's like there's this stubbornness there of wanting to do something that's not working, of doing the same opening play every game for the last few weeks. It's just it's so yeah. So Texas is stubborn. There's the overreaction.
And I know it can be a little bit of revisionist history, but on that last drive, I know Oklahoma was out of timeouts, but we saw it all game. We've seen it all season. Their offense thrives in playing with tempo. So once
that's why Venables didn't care that he blew all those timeouts. He's like, well, if they give me a minute, this is what we do anyway.
Exactly. So if I'm Sark, why once they get the ball down to the 20, do you not call a timeout and reset your defense? Like I know like a lot of these things are revisionist history, but there were a little bit of just head scratching decisions that he had to answer for.
I agree. I mean, I mentioned this in the overreactions piece, and I think everyone that watched the game has probably thought about it, that PK did not make the necessary adjustments when it mattered, especially. But
which is out of character for him. He usually does adjust.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can dig into for the defense. It's also unfortunate that we have the injuries we have in the secondary. Am I the only one that noticed? I don't know if this was soft coverage. Gavin Holmes kind of struggles at boundary corner. It's not his.
That's not really his spot.
Mm-hmm.
No, he struggles with the tackle approaches too. He can't keep the play in front of him. Sometimes it feels like he's playing too fast for his own good.
He's a Deion Sanders type of corner, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely better at the field spot, or I almost think he would be better as like I think there's situations where he would be almost better as like a faster nickel or deep cover corner. I think those are just, he's more of a specialty guy. I don't get why we took Terrence Brooks off the field at times. I get that was just to rotate, but I think that was a mistake. Gavin Holmes and Malik Muhammad were 5 for 5 when targeted in coverage.
I'll say this while we're on it. Let's say for the now we expect Ryan Watts back either by Houston or by BYU at the latest. But if we magically get back to Dallas and have a rematch between those two, I would hope that we play Johnny Barron at corner if it comes to that.
Yeah, I would have liked to see that more.
I was like, okay, clearly we're gonna need a physical guy out on the corner where they're running these like screens and things like that. You need somebody who's really gonna blow it up. And Barron's that kind of guy. And Watts would have done really well in this game. There were some plays that I was like, yeah, Watts makes that play.
Yeah, and OU's not really a faster receiving core, so I don't know how much they would have exploited Watts in that regard necessarily. So,
And they lost on Joel Anthony, who was their leading receiver. He's out for the season now.
well, I mean, I always hate to see that sort of stuff.
So,
Either way, so
hopefully he has a good surgery and is able to get back out there next year.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, I'll agree with y'all because the philosophy for the entire season has been, keep guys fresh up front. Let's show the dominance of our defensive line because that'll help alleviate any other pressure on any other level of the defense. Let's really mold this defense to take care of any of the potential matchup advantages that opposing offenses will have. Y'all mentioned, having an effective spy against Jalen Milroe. I thought that Texas's defensive line was obviously extremely disruptive against Baylor. We made really good adjustments, I thought, against Kansas 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it just wasn't there. And yeah, Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy both both get a season high in defensive snaps, at least a season high in Big 12 play last weekend. So you can see part of the issue there. Anyway, this is the last thing I wanted to say on the dual threat quarterback front. Am I crazy here for thinking that offensive coordinators and head coaches are going to let their quarterbacks kind of tuck it and run more often and be more aggressive in that regard against Texas? I'm thinking Dana Holgorsen with Donovan Smith, Kansas State with
not any more than they were going to anyway. I would like to believe though that if they did, PK would adjust. He doesn't seem to make the same mistake over and over, like game to game kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't.
This was just an oddly stubborn game.
I agree.
It's like usually Sark even would say like, okay, let's not try this. Although when they were on the goal line, I thought to myself, you know what? If you just want to smash into the goal like that, why not give it to Tavondre Sweat? Because nobody was going to stop him. Like he was the only one who seemed to be moving anything, and he was the one guy who didn't get the ball. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Nash's tweet about the just handing it to Tavondre Sweat in that situation, and I saw Ian Boyd's response saying a good idea, but you have to practice it. I guess I would be in that same boat of be an interesting wrinkle. Okay, here's my next overreaction is better Big 12 teams will consistently bait Ewers into turnovers in the second half of the season. This comes with an asterisk if I'm being like realistic about it. I know this is overreactions and that's why I'm mentioning this, but the asterisk is you guys kind of hinted at it earlier where if Sark keeps coming out with the same game plan of giving Ewers this like kind of one or two read intermediate throws, different looks in the screen game, and then just trying to hand the ball off in the outside zone, everyone's going to pick up on that, and more corners are going to start jumping routes, and we're going to start seeing more opportunities for early turnovers. Ewers has had 4 turnovers in the last 2 games. I think 2 of those were bad throws or bad reads or just getting the ball out a little too quick, staring down his receiver. And then obviously the fumble against OU, just slide. I don't know why you're trying in that situation where clearly you're not going to be picking up the first down and you're around the middle of the field. I don't get why you're trying to go head first against a physical OU defender. Just slide, get down. So, what are y'all thinking about Ewers turnover issues? How do you see that progressing?
I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned. That first one was just kind of I don't know what you were thinking there. The second one was I expect my All-American tight end to just make this play. And, the thing is, like, the ball, like, Sanders could have caught it. And here's one thing to wind back. It looked like Sanders just wasn't ready, so there was no point of putting him out there. So we can circle back to that. So I'm not, bottom line, I'm not overly concerned about it. I think that luckily Ewers cleaned it up after that and protected the ball well and had a really good day, but obviously a really bad start. But that wasn't the reason Texas lost the game. I mean, Texas was winning the game. Early in the second quarter we went up 14-10, but with that pass to Gunnar Helm. So, you overcame that, and that was behind you, and Ewers was the best quarterback throughout the rest of the day, I thought.
Yeah, I think we saw in year one with Ewers, you have these really high highs and you have some pretty low lows as well. And he's somewhat of a streaky quarterback. He's kind of figured it out this year, but we did see those kind of low lows come back in the first couple of drives on Saturday. And then, like Tarik, you mentioned, he really cleaned it up. And I always like to think about, you don't want to play back if one thing went different, but, say Oklahoma, we pick off Gabriel at the end of the game and Texas wins 30-27. I think a lot of the conversation is then around like, oh my God, Quinn Ewers finished the game 23 of 25 for over 300 yards. Like, what a performance. So I do think it just the way it's framed can be a little off just because of the result. And, obviously those first couple of interceptions and that fumble hurt Texas as a whole, but it's not something I'm super worried about going forward. I typically trust Ewers. You saw also, I forget who clipped this. It might've been Nash. But that first interception, certainly on Quinn, but Adonai Mitchell, a little bit of lack of effort. And you saw that kind of going forward. And on the last drive, there was a perfect depiction of it where Quinn just didn't trust that slant route to Mitchell, and he held the ball and ended up getting sacked. So, I don't think all of it's completely on him, and it's not something I would be, like Tarik said, not something I'm overly concerned with.
If he throws 2 interceptions against Houston, okay, well, we'll be
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's valid.
I just think it's not trending in the right direction right now. But yeah, bye week comes, you have time to clean that up, get in the film room, figure out what's going wrong. He's responded well this season. I will say, on a realistic front, I do think he played well. Like y'all are saying, he responded really well, and his ability to command the short intermediate passing game this season has been ultra impressive, and it was again in this one. I think he had 1 or 2 incompletions on attempts of 10 plus yards. So yeah, impressive in that regard this game for sure. My next overreaction, maybe this is the least bit of overreactions. I do think Jalen, it is an overreaction, but I actually do believe it. I think Jalen Ford's Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year campaign is done. He just had the lowest graded start of his career in the biggest conference game of the season. Biggest
game in Texas football of the last 14 years. You can add that in there. I think it's a valid take. I don't hate that.
That part maybe makes me reconsider.
And but if you think about it too, this is going to be the most watched Big 12 game of the season, and obviously hopefully the conference media members do their due diligence, but a lot of them are going to remember this game, and it's not
they're absolutely not going to do that.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of them will remember this game, and it's not like Jalen Ford was just bad based off of the PFF numbers. Like, if you're watching that game, you're seeing the back of his jersey way too much because he's chasing guys downfield. So I don't hate that take at all, Andrew. And he was so good for the first 5 games and even the 13 games dating back to last year. That is just such an unfortunate time for this performance to come about. So
it is.
I'm gonna have to step in as Rich Eisen and say that's an overreaction.
Okay, that's fair. That's why it's on overreaction.
I certainly think. Okay, first of all, I'm not sure Jalen Ford was going to win it anyway, but I don't think this game in and of itself will sink him. Especially depending on how he rebounds. If you have some really good games against BYU and Houston and others, and depending on how the rest of the season goes, for example, at this point last year, I don't think Caleb Williams was even being really mentioned for the Heisman. So the last 6 weeks, things can really turn around. But I'll say it's an overreaction. I'm not there yet. Although it did kind of look as though I've just never seen Jalen Ford look like that before. It just taking bad angles over and over again. Guys almost running into him, and he still didn't tackle him. I'm just like, what is going on? I said this on Twitter, and Doc Texas, one of the great Longhorn Twitter people, good friend of mine, he said people weren't happy with me. It's like it almost felt to me like what should have happened was Sark should have taken him out first. He should have pulled a reverse Lincoln Riley, because it would be on the defense side of the ball. He should have taken Jalen Ford out first series and said, like, okay, you got to calm down and you got to take better angles, because I think it was almost like by letting it keep going, it was kind of enabling him to do the same thing, because there's no consequence. He was like, okay, this has to stop for at least a series, and so that's what I thought he needed to be done, but that didn't happen. So
yeah,
because I mean there were some terrible angles. Just I just didn't know what I was looking at. I'm like, what's going on? Like, when did he turn into like the worst version of Luke Brockermeyer or something?
Yeah. It did kind of feel like watching Luke Brockermeyer when he was chasing. When he was chasing at times 2 seasons ago. And I mean, so Jalen Ford already 4th most receiving yards allowed in coverage of any Big 12 linebacker this season, because he gives up, I don't know if y'all saw the numbers, 8 receptions on 10 targets. I think it was a little over 80 receiving yards, like over 50 yards after the catch. It was.
This was who?
Jalen Ford.
All right.
Yeah, the yards after the catch is the issue. Like the receiving percentage doesn't really bother me, because a lot of the guys he's covering are coming out of the backfield or the H-back position, so that they're gonna make the catch. But you just got to bring them to the ground, and that the move where he got caught up against Dylan Gabriel is going to be on Oklahoma highlight reels all season long. So that's unfortunate as well.
Yeah, and I'll say this because I don't want this to be the Jalen Ford hate show. Obviously we're all rooting for his progression down the stretch, for him to bounce back strong. I do think he'll play well down the stretch. He's had bad games before in the last 2 seasons, and he's shown the knack to just come back huge. And I think we'll see a great effort from him against Houston and BYU. But I mean, we'd be sticking our head in the sand if we said that it wasn't a bad showing last weekend. So
yeah, and I think Texas needs him to play well to achieve their ultimate, conference and potentially national goals. Like you saw why the Oklahoma offense was so successful, because Ford had a bad game. That wasn't, those are 2 very in sync things.
Yeah, well, and I was looking this up earlier, Shane, to your point of us needing him to play well. The 3 lowest graded starts of his career were, ironically, OU last, but he was taken out around halftime there. It was OU last season. I'm going to wipe that out, but also Texas Tech and then OU this season. That tells me we need him to be good for this defense to play up to their potential and ultimately Texas to win games. So, yeah. Here's my last overreaction from what I did on the site. I said that this is the overreact. This was the biggest overreaction. That Texas's Big 12 title hopes are shot. I'll say it. I'll lay it out there. The biggest overreaction that I think you could have. I will say this is the realistic portion of this that I don't like, is that West Virginia controls its own Big 12 title destiny at this point, and we do not.
I think this is where Shane and I will have our Duke out.
Yeah, probably. But I'll lay this out first. So, for the 2 teams that'll be in the Big 12 championship game, obviously OU has the clearest path right now. But for the 2 teams to make the Big 12 championship game, there's a pretty complicated tiebreaker in there. And, you obviously don't want a situation, say West Virginia is a 1-loss team in Big 12 play when we reach the end of the regular season, then you don't really want to get into the tiebreaker scenarios there. West Virginia or OU, for Texas to feel comfortable, it's going to have to lose 2 more games in Big 12 play by the end of the season. That's not a guarantee of happening. That's where I don't feel great, and I think that's where all big Texas fans should be cautiously optimistic about Texas's Big 12 championship game odds at this point. Now, the flip side of that, the reason you should feel good is because I think Texas has probably one of the 2 or 3 easiest schedules in the Big 12 in the second half. They don't play a single top 25 team right now. So I'll pass it over to y'all, though. Let you have at it.
I think,
well, Shane had some comments from Twitter with me about this, I recall. So
yeah, you can privy the audience with your take.
Okay. I somewhat agree with Andrew. Now I don't quite see, this is the thing about Twitter. People don't always think of bigger context. They just, if people just hear something they don't like, they just think you're like, oh, you're a naysayer, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The problem I have here is Texas, to get to the game, is going to have to win 6 straight. And they haven't done it since Mac Brown. So that's a problem. Now, of course, theoretically, you don't have to win all 6 to get there. But I think what Texas fans want, it's not just to get to the Big 12 title game. It's, we want to get there, and this will be the de facto win and get into the playoff game. It's not, I think if you just got there and it was like you're there for the playoff and there for the title game, but it's not the playoff implications, I think people will be a little let down. So that's one factor in this. But my point there was, can you really trust Texas to win 6 straight? Can you really trust them, if they're in a 1-possession game, not to let the team drive down and win the game, even when they're just doing the same thing that they've been doing, and you just have to make an adjustment and refuse to make the adjustment? Those are the things that, Texas just hasn't done in so long that you just can't give them the benefit of the doubt. That's the main point I was making there. Also, I'm a bit puzzled as to why people there needs to be this reality check of, there's statistics, and then there's certain factors that when you put them in, the statistics don't always look the same way. And when Texas plays Oklahoma, I don't really care about statistics at that point. It seems to follow the same model year after year after year. Texas generally does enough where they should be able to win the game and close it out on their own terms, and they still find a way to lose it. They've done it 4 out of the last 5 games. So that's why I was like, yeah, I really don't want a rematch, because I don't have any real confidence it would turn out any differently. Now, that's not to say you don't want to go to the Big 12 championship game. It's not that you're saying that Texas is going to lose the next 6 games. It's not that you're saying Texas is untalented. It's just an observation of, this team has had your number. You might just want to give this a year to heal and get back at them next year, kind of a thing. Go ahead. Why don't you tear that all down?
I think you conveniently put your main point at the end of the argument, because I think you realize that, saying that you don't want Texas to go to the Big 12 championship game this year and play Oklahoma, it's just a really wild take. And it's almost like I was thinking about it. It is almost like, and I would be curious to see if you would admit this, it's a bit of a selfish take, in the sense that, obviously no one in the locker room, no one on the coaching staff, 98% of the fan base doesn't feel that way. But it seems like the only reason you don't want Texas to end up and play Oklahoma is because of the potential of, the emotional catastrophe that could happen if the Sooners beat us twice in 1 year, which, granted, I completely agree with that. It would be horrible. And I certainly don't want to see that happen. But to not even want the game to be played, I think it was just, I don't know. It just it's almost like you're giving up on this season, even though this is the best start to a season we've had in 14 years. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, and I agree with what you said at the beginning of all that, is we cannot give Texas the benefit of the doubt. There's a great chance that they lose one of these next 6 games, even though they're going to be a touchdown favorite in all of them. And, we have to see this Longhorn team do it week in and week out. But to not want that and to not want Texas to get to Arlington and have that chance to not only avenge the loss, but if they get to Arlington at 11-1 and they win that game, we're going to have to see how it shakes out, but that's almost a de facto play into the college football playoff. If you're a 12-1 Texas with a win at Alabama and a Big 12 title with a win at that point, probably over a top 5 or 10 Oklahoma team, you're not getting left out. So while I do completely agree that losing twice to Oklahoma, there really probably isn't any worse feeling than that. I think to not even want to play the game is just as a take I disagree with. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, for guys like David Bendo who've been on campus for 5 years, and he acknowledged that, he was the one that messed up on the last play. And Jalen Ford, been on campus 4 years and played his worst game of his career. I think to not want those guys to have a chance to redeem themselves is, like I said, almost a bit selfish. And I do think that Texas is one of the 8 best teams in the country, maybe even one of the 5 best teams in the country. I think if they play Oklahoma again, they can beat them. And yeah, I just didn't like the take. And it all comes back to this is the best start we've had in so long. And to just kind of want to throw it all away just because of one loss seemed, I don't know. I didn't like it.
Okay. May I respond, Andrew?
Bad.
Okay, but the thing is, it's not just the one loss. It's the pattern. Now, I work, working at Texas, working on a master's in physics and a PhD in philosophy. So in science, when you notice patterns, you can't just ignore them because you hope that something else will happen out after. And there's just kind of a science of sports too. It's not an exact science, but Texas just finds a way too often to beat. I mean, the fact is you've beaten Alabama as many times in 5 years as you've beaten Oklahoma. That just doesn't augur well.
So,
that's not something that you just say.
I think even
I'm going to bet that if they play them again, Texas will win. Yes.
If you told me right now that Texas has a 10% chance to beat Oklahoma and Dallas, I'm 100% signing up for that and hoping this team gets to the Big 12 championship. You could, I just don't like the notion.
Maybe I framed this wrong. Of course, I want Texas to go to the Big 12 championship. Of course, I want them to win this game. But people are making this about no. I want this rematch so bad because I know that.
Yeah, I don't.
That's the thing. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's accurate.
Okay, I think we could find some common ground here because I'm going to be rooting for Oklahoma to lose every one of their last 6 conference games. If you ask me, would I rather play Oklahoma in the Big 12 title or any one of the other 12 teams? I am picking the field 100 out of 100 times. So I think we have some actual common ground with that. I'm just saying if it's Oklahoma, which odds are it probably will be, and I welcome that challenge too. But no, I hate the people that are always like, oh, let's make it hard on ourselves. Even in non-con scheduling, just do what Michigan does. Granted we play them next year, but why make it harder on yourself? So I agree with you in that sense.
Folks, we have the playoffs to be hard. You don't need to make it harder.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean that's my own thing. It's just I think there just seems to be this implicit assumption, maybe not shared by anyone on this Zoom call, but actually we're not on Zoom, we're on Skype, but leave that aside, that Texas will just run through the rest of the schedule. They'll meet Oklahoma and they'll win that rematch. Okay. You haven't once gone 6-0 since let's just say the first half of the season. It's starting out the second half. Texas hasn't won 6 straight games since 2009. So this is a tall ask. Granted, it's a very pretty. I mean, you can't really ask for a better schedule for 6 games, but you just can't believe it until they do it. And then you have that rematch, and then where anything can happen. And the other thing is, even if it's a rematch, it's not quite the same because Red River really showed itself in this game where like one side of the field really felt like the home game and one really felt like the away game where it was really affecting everything. And like just notice where the mistakes were made. They're always made at that end. So I think if you play in Jerry World, it's not going to be quite the same. So, I don't know. I'm not just yearning for a rematch. It's more of like it's like, okay, we'll circle back to that in 363 days.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get your point.
If it happens, I mean,
yeah, okay, there we go. All right, there.
Bring it
Yeah.
on, but it's like
Okay.
I'm not. It's but like all throughout Twitter today. That's why I said it. Maybe I should have said this. It's like I kept saying like, my friend Kieran. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's like, oh, I've never wanted a rematch so bad.
Yeah,
in my
no,
life.
bad.
I was like,
Yeah.
nah. It's like actually, I really don't want the rematch. I was like, because like. It's like here's the like I'm not even sure what like how great of a story it would be even if we did win it. I'm just like I feel like yeah.
And just kind of to almost to shift the conversation a little bit, I'll ask this to both of you guys. So in regard to making the college football playoff, 27 of the 32 teams that have made it since its inception have been conference champions. And granted, a lot of that has to do with if you win your conference championship game, you have less losses, and if you have multiple losses, you're not going to make it. Blah blah blah. But if you were going to say going into the season, you're going to be 12-1 at the end of the year, would you rather? And this is getting a little ahead of the skis, but would you rather have the loss in week 6, or would you rather be 12-0 and pull a TCU and lose in the title game against Oklahoma? I mean, I think it's debatable either way.
No, I'll take the week 6 loss and win the title. I need some.
There we go.
I need some trophies in this season.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
I do see where you're coming from and all of it.
Let me wrangle this.
To Andrew's point, I mean the big problem here is you don't control your own destiny now. The good news is I don't think anyone really expects West Virginia to run the table, do they? I think we expect 2 or 3 losses from them.
Agree. Yeah.
Probably, but here, let me ask this though: even for West Virginia's sake, we'll get into this.
Who are their last 6? Who are their last 6 at this point?
So they do host OU, or sorry, they go to OU, but then at Houston, Oklahoma State, at UCF, BYU, at OU, Cincinnati, at Baylor. I could see them coming out of that with 1 loss. I could see it. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not.
I think they lose. I'm going to say Oklahoma, and they lose BYU. Is it at BYU? Is it in Provo?
No.
Oh, okay.
So traveling to Orlando to play UCF is a sneaky tough game, and I'm not.
UCF's not looking great right now.
They aren't, especially with the quarterback injuries and hammered Kansas last week. So nice, but I just Garrett Green's not going to lead. Garrett Green's not winning 9 games. Like West Virginia is, they're scrappy and people can
remind me a little of Kansas State last year.
People can clip this from 6 weeks from now. But if West Virginia wins more than 6 conference games, I'd be shocked. I don't think that's a very good football team. They're picked to finish 14th in the conference for a reason. They're clearly better than that. But I don't think we have to worry about West Virginia going 8-1 in the conference. Granted, their schedule is pretty easy, but so is a lot of the Big 12 schedules because the conference isn't that good this year. But I'm just not. I'm more worried about like a Tech getting hot. They're sitting at 2-1 right now in that last game.
But you play Tech at the end of the season.
No, yeah. So
you don't play West Virginia.
I think that game against Tech could be a de facto winner makes the title game. I'm not worried about West Virginia winning more than 6 games. I just don't think they're that good of a football team, honestly.
I'll disagree with you there. I think here's where West.
Wouldn't it be the most Texas story ever, though, for us to run the table, be 11-1, and not get into the conference title?
That would be that 100% would be.
It would be like, okay, at that point, you literally have to say Texas is cursed. Somebody's done some voodoo, trading their soul to the devil. I don't know what's. someone has paid the Big 12 refs off. I don't know.
Let me get this point across about West Virginia, right? So I have watched them a decent amount this year. I watched the TCU game all the way through. I unfortunately watched most of their game against Tech. I also watched them play Pitt. They're a scrappy football team that is finding different ways to win games behind a quarterback that can throw and can run. They also have a really solid running back in CJ Donaldson. What could be their undoing is Garrett Green and CJ Donaldson have both faced their fair share of injury issues the last 2 years. They play physical football and run it a lot. If either of those guys gets injured, that could undo it a little bit. It is scary, though, that West Virginia is a team that's finding all these different ways to win football games at home and on the road, and doing it against not great, but decent football teams. So West Virginia, in my opinion, is probably an 8 or 9 win team this year, but I could see that creeping up to 10, which becomes dangerous, especially if we drop another game. So that's my point. Now, let me counter to what y'all were saying about us facing or not facing OU in the Big 12 title game. Take this into consideration. There's a pretty large group of Power 5 teams that are vying for the playoff field right now. You also have a much stronger Pac-12 than you had in years past. I would be surprised at this point if the Pac-12 doesn't get a team into the playoff, whether that be Washington, Oregon, probably not USC, but I guess they're still in the running. I mean, hell, Wazoo looks really good. Texas might need to beat OU again to ensure that they'll be back in the playoff. Okay, think about this. Florida State's undefeated.
I think it's a valid point.
Georgia's undefeated.
No, it's not that I don't disagree. But I have a feeling the Pac-12 might eat each other in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, I agree with that as well.
That's one problem, because the problem is, like, with Florida State, they're going to miss like a lot of the certain teams in the ACC into the title game, versus it seems like all the good Pac-12 teams are all going to play each other and they can't all win. But ultimately, I don't think we need to worry about the playoff right now. I mean, you've got I say win the Big 12 and let the chips fall where they may. You know this much. The committee is going to get you in if they can get you in, because they only care about one thing: ratings. And Texas is ratings. So I wouldn't worry too much about it on that point. If you're 12-1 with a 4-point loss to what would be a top 10 team, I'm sure, I think there are worse places to be in.
Fair. Let's move on to this. Again, things that matter a little bit more for us down the stretch, at least heading to the bye week. Let's reset right now for like what the top of the Big 12 looks like. Let's give our top 5 teams in the Big 12. I'm assuming all of us are going to be including OU and Texas in that mix. I'm still going, at this point, I have to say 1 OU, 2 Texas. Number 3, I have Kansas. Forgot about them. My number 3 is Kansas. Number 4 is West Virginia. And then number 5 is where it starts getting tough. I'm going to put Tech there right now, but I also think Iowa State is starting to get better. I think Rocco Becht is going to be a good quarterback for them, and didn't they
just give up 70 to Oklahoma?
50, but we gave up 34, and that was Iowa State playing in Norman. I mean, anyway.
I thought that was in Iowa State. My bad. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Iowa State, yes, they did get beat pretty bad by OU, but I'm saying when Iowa State's in Ames, I think they can be pretty dangerous. They just pretty much completely beat TCU on both sides of the ball by 14 points. But anyway, that's my top 5. OU 1, Texas 2, Kansas 3, West Virginia 4, Texas Tech 5.
That's mine too.
Jane?
I have Oklahoma 1, Texas 2, Kansas 3, Texas Tech 4, Kansas State 5. I still think Will Howard's a pretty good quarterback. I know what we saw on Friday night in Stillwater was
finally some good thing for him.
Yeah, somewhat ugly. Shout out Alan Bowman. Played a decent game. I think the loss of some skill players, including Deuce Vaughn, has hurt them. But I still think that
they'll turn it. Oklahoma State this year.
I think Kansas State will be the hardest game Kansas State and Tech will be the two hardest games on the schedule for Texas. And, I don't have West Virginia in my top 5 because, like I said 15 minutes ago, I just don't think it's a very good football team. I think they probably win 5 or 6 conference games. But
Then you get both those games at home, by the way.
yeah, which is great. Which is great.
So, well, I guess, Shane, that serves as a transition for us. Last thing I want to cover is, what do you think is the hardest game left on Texas's schedule? Or maybe the most dangerous?
BYU.
BYU, I could see. I kind of hinted at it earlier. I think Iowa State and Ames. Weird stuff happens there. They're getting better. I do think we are the vastly superior team, but they have a dual threat quarterback that can give you issues. They've looked better in the last 2 weeks. Last 3 weeks outside of the second half against OU.
And they run Sark's favorite defense.
Yeah. I think that Iowa State could give us some issues. To say that late November games in Ames, or even mid-November games in Ames, have never given a top 10 team issues is just a lie. So that's my most dangerous one, but I get why people might counter that. But I'll pass it over to y'all.
BYU, I think they're just really physical, and after Saturday, those are the teams that really make me wonder.
What's interesting here is, we play Houston after the bye, and then of the remaining 5 games, Andrew, you noted Iowa State as your toughest. Tark noted BYU. I said Kansas State and Tech, and then that 5th game is at TCU. So those are our last 5 games. So while it might not look like a world-beating schedule, each team offers their own challenges to Texas, and like kind of full circle to the top of the show. And Tarek was talking about you can't take anything for granted, especially with this program. I think it's going to be a grind week by week. So,
and I think there's a decent chance that Chandler Morris misses the rest of the regular season with an MCL injury. So,
who's their backup?
Josh Hoover, redshirt freshman from McKinney Boyd High School. He just hasn't played much football at the collegiate level. Like I say, he's a redshirt freshman. He looked okay, but he threw a pick last week. A pick and a touchdown. So I'm not too worried about TCU right now. I think that is a revenge game big on Sark's mind. I also think that they've run into some issues this year. I don't know if Sonny Dykes is the answer there. Kansas State, we play them really well. We get them at home. I know it's Kansas State. They're still a decent football team. I'm not super worried about that one. But BYU, that one can always scare you at home or on the road.
I wouldn't say it when we use the term worry. I don't know that I'm worried about any game in particular. It's just I'm more worried about Texas' mental psyche and their ability to just bounce back.
Yeah,
that's, as I mentioned in our chat, it's like OU, like when we win, it doesn't seem to have like the boost it should. Like, okay, now like this is, you can take this to the finish line and kind of just go finish. It seems like you still drop 2 games after that. Then if you lose it, it's like you just mentally fall apart and can't win anything after that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
that's what worries me more than any particular team.
I think to that, and like we all pick different teams, it's the collection of the remaining 6 games. It's not one opponent. It's, can Texas be consistent and grind out these wins, which we haven't seen, like Tarek mentioned, but you can only hope.
Yeah, I'm encouraged, though, because last season, I think, you had the slip up against TCU. I don't think we have a team on the schedule down the stretch as good as TCU, Kansas State, or Oklahoma State at that point in time when we lost to them. And those were all close games. So Sark has given me reason to believe that he can win these. I do think we're in a decent spot to do so. We at least stayed in the title hunt last year, beating some decent Kansas and Baylor teams by decisive margins, double digits. So, yeah, I have faith. But we're running up on an hour here. So, let's enjoy the bye week best we can. At least injured players. This is where I'll finish up. Jake Majors, high ankle sprain, from what I read. He potentially could be back early November. Cole Hudson, who suffered an injury against Wyoming, Sark said today he is the second team center. That's interesting news, significant news, because it sounds like he could be our center for the rest of October. And then Ryan Watts, hamstring issue, potentially could be back against Houston. I'd say at the latest probably for the BYU game. It would be nice to have him back for Houston, though. They do have a pretty decent receiving core. Matthew Golden is definitely one of the better receivers in the Big 12. What else you got? Jalen Catalon day-to-day. I'd assume he's going to be on a pitch count for the Houston game, even more so than he has been the rest of the season to date.
I think we're gonna have more Derek Williams, that's for sure.
Derek Williams has been solid, man. Let him loose. And then Chris Ross, sounds like Houston game. He'll be back in the rotation. Am I missing anyone injury wise? Anyone else? I don't think so. Oh, JT Sanders has the extra week of rest, but it sounds like he should be.
Yeah, Sark says he's going to rest this week. So
yeah.
I mean, one thing you can be thankful for is you don't have any serious injuries that people can't come back. As Sark's mentor, Pete Carroll, often said you want to go into November kind of healthy and ready to finish. So if you can rest all those guys and beat BYU and Houston, you maybe should do that. Because you gotta do that. And here's, I guess, let's end on this. I was very happy to hear Sark say, "Yeah, I kicked myself for not playing Jonte Cook more." Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to see a lot of depth flexed against Houston in a couple of weeks. I think that would be a great sign.
Yeah,
give people a little bit more confidence too that a lot of these guys that we could play, if injuries do pile up at any point in the season, that we're fine. I think staying in OU, experiencing some of the injuries we did staying in that game, I think should be enough confidence instilling to feel good. But yeah. Y'all got anything else before we get up and going here?
Nope.
All right.
Don't get too low. Don't get too high. We got 6 more games to go.
Yep. Stay tuned here. Like I said, we'll be back within the next week or so. Obviously next week for previewing the Houston game, and then later this week, I'd like to do a little bit more of a mid-season recap or a midway point, I guess, of the regular season. Look at position by position, see how we're looking so far. We'll take a look at recruiting. It's a good week to do that, see where we're at, what it's looking like for 2024 and 2025 moving forward. And then also stay tuned. We'll be getting, we're 3 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks, about 4 weeks from the start of the college hoops regular season. So
Yep.
Something else to take your mind off of it if you want to feel like a Kansas fan. So, but
Or a Tech fan.
Yeah.
They were already, after that West Virginia game, they were already talking about basketball.
Yeah. Anyway.
I forget, when does baseball start? January?
February, likely.
February.
Yeah. So you still got some time for that. But I'm always excited for basketball, so that's not anything new. But anyway, for Tarik LaCour, Shane Black, Andrew Miller, that's pretty much it. Welcome.
Welcome.